let's talk about defining a site and adding some content into that site using Dreamweaver. When you begin, you might start on a welcome or start screen that has some quick buttons to create new documents, or if you're on a blank screen like mine, you can always create a new document using the File New option and choose to open a brand new HTML document, for example, and I'm going to choose the doc type of HTML5. We can give that a title right from the get-go or attach some CSS if we already had some, and I could click to create that document simply by hitting create. You'll notice that there's a number of other types of document types that we can open, and we could actually open a document that already uses the Bootstrap framework installed right within it. I'm not going to do that right now. Typically when I begin, I'm going to start with a pure blank document without any kind of framework or beginning place. But once we establish some templates and things, we could also start from there. And there's a number of starter templates that are good for learning a little bit about layout or structures. And you could go from one of those starter templates, or if you have a template defined yourself, you can go to Site Templates and use one of the templates that you've made in the past in order to have a new beginning document. I'm going to choose New Document, blank, and go ahead and create a brand new document. And once we do this, of course, it will actually, in the code view, give us the basic anatomy of a web page, including the HTML and the two-part structure of the head and body. And it will also docutype this to HTML5, bring in our character set, and that's the beginning code that we'll need to create basically any other, that's sort of universal among all web pages to have these particular tags. So it adds those for us by default. Now, before we get further into creating content, one of the things that you'll want to do in Dreamweaver is begin by defining a site. And by defining a site, you actually tell Dreamweaver where your files are, and then later you can also tell it where the server files are when you want to actually upload your files to the server. And this is handy because it will keep all of your files in one place with the appropriate file references all in one place. And so I'm going to do that by going into the Site menu and creating a brand new site right here. So I'm going to say Site, New Site. And when we do that, we can define for Dreamweaver what our new site will be. And basically what you'll do is just point Dreamweaver to the root folder where you're intending to put all of your files. And for every exercise or project that you ever create, you should start by creating a root folder that will house all of the files that are relevant to that particular project. So I've already created that root folder, and all I really need to do is browse out to that folder. So that's what's called your local site folder in Dreamweaver. Basically, where are your files going to be within your own local system? And so I'm going to browse to where that might be and choose where it is. And in my particular case, I've already created a folder for this that I'm calling the Hyperpoem exercise. I've already actually dropped in some images and JavaScript into that folder, but I'm going to orient Dreamweaver to this as my root folder by selecting that folder as my root. And then I could also give this a name, and I might call it my Hyperpoem because that's the exercise I'll be working on. And I'll hit save. And this is telling me that I'm having a little bit of an error in the sense that I'm actually putting a root folder inside of another root folder. Are you sure you want to do that? This always works just fine. I'm just going to click OK, and it's okay that I did that. Once I've done this, you'll notice that on the right-hand side, it's actually showing me different files related to my current project. Now, I never set up a server of how to upload this project, but I have defined the project itself. And once I save my document now, if I save it, you'll see that it will actually show up within the file system. And so if I go to say save as, it will default me into the current root directory. So I don't have to navigate to that anymore. Dreamweaver knows now where you want to put your files. And that's great. So I can actually save this in there and maybe save it as an index page within my root directory. And you'll notice that that particular file is showing up now inside of the Files menu. If I ever was to close this file, I could easily reopen it from the Files panel just by double-clicking, and that file is back and open. This is handy as well because if I actually want to insert images and things that are available to me right here, I could actually just drag and drop that image into my content, and that would work. Now, it will work if I'm in design view anyway, you'd be able to actually drag and drop an image in, and you'll see that it actually gives me the correct file path to that particular image when I do that, and that's because I've defined a site already, so it knows the file path that will be there. If we hadn't defined a site, it might have actually included a file path that includes the beginning with file : / and when you see that, you know that you actually have an absolute reference to a file on your local system. This will never work once we upload it to an actual server because we don't have access to your own local file system. You want to make sure that your files are relatively referenced, meaning that they're a nice, clean, relative reference to the current location of your HTML document. And so in this case, the reference starts at your root folder where your HTML document is, and it's going to look into an images folder and then look for this file called tree.jpg in order to find that image file. So it can be really useful to have our files established to set up a root site, and I encourage you to do this for every project or exercise that you'll create within Dreamweaver. You'll create your own separate site for that. You'll notice when I click on mine, I've got a bunch of sites defined. And so once we've done this and I actually set up servers as well, I won't have to re-establish my servers and login information each time. Dreamweaver will simply remember that. And I can now define my servers either by going back under the site option to manage sites and choosing HyperPoem and then choosing to edit that particular site, and then going over not only to my local definition of where my root folder is, but also to my server definition, and adding an FTP server to this. And this is where we put in our login information, for example, for the MAT server, if we wanted to do that. I'm not going to do that right now, but the other place that I could do that is simply right here under define servers. You notice that it would go right back over to that particular location, and I could add a server for the remote files where I want to put these on my web host ultimately, instead of just my local files. Right now, I'm good with just having the local files, and I have a nice site defined. So perfect. Once we have a site, we're ready to add some content to it. And I can add my content simply by typing it in. Now, I could do that in two places. I'm in the split mode right now and my design view. You'll notice that if I just start typing in my design view, I can start typing to add content, right? And so I'm able to actually add some content right by typing. As soon as I hit enter, inside of my code, it would have actually formatted that as a paragraph and brought it into my code. So that's nice. I can quickly add some content, add some more, and as I type, I'm actually adding code to the document. So I can work kind of visually and just type right within the environment. Certainly, I could also type within my code. I could add a paragraph tag and add code here, which adds content to my design view over on the right hand side. So super handy. If I wanted to see what this would actually look like in a web browser, obviously I'd switch to live view and we get a little bit better representation of that. But design view can be a little bit easier way to just click and type to add content. You can do that in live view, but I would have to make sure that I click onto my paragraph, select that paragraph, and kind of double click within it. Then I could add in live view as well. And so it is possible to edit within live view. It's just sometimes a little harder than in the design view, which is optimized for quickly adding or editing content. Now, the content that I actually want to bring into this is the content for my HyperPoem. And I actually have that saved as a Word doc over here. And you'll notice that the poem is by Pablo Neruda. It's called This Is Simple. And I want to bring this content in and start to format and create a web page around that particular content. And of course, I want my web page to be thematically representative of this content as well. I want to style it appropriately and symbolically within my code and using my CSS. But to bring it in, how can I do that? So one thing that I can do is just simply copy this content in and then paste it into Dreamweaver. You'll notice that I can copy it. I'm using the Control-C or Command-C on Mac, and I'll use Control-V or Command-V in order to paste that content right within. So I'm going to be able to paste this content in. One of the things that happens when I paste this content in is it actually comes over with a little bit of structure. you'll notice that the first paragraph is bolded using a strong tag, and some of the subsequent paragraphs actually have line breaks in them or paragraphs being defined. And that's because that definition, that structure, was a part of my Word document as well, and it will keep some of that structure for you when you copy and paste in. This isn't always what you want. Sometimes when you copy and paste from a web page or other source, you don't want to have any of that coding coming with it, that structure that's behind the scenes. So one of the other ways that I can actually paste this in is to use a function called paste special. It's under the edit menu, or also available using the Control-Shift-V or Command-Shift-V on Mac. And I can choose to paste special, which gives me options on how I want to bring my content in. You'll notice that if I choose the text only option, it will come over without any structural formatting as part of it. And so in this particular case, text only would bring all the content, but it didn't really format it at all. So I put it's all in one paragraph in this case within the HTML. By adding it, I do add my content into a paragraph, but other than that, none of the rest of the formatting actually came in. And I could choose, that can be really handy. I often like to make sure that I make all the explicit choices of how to format my content. So when I bring stuff in, I want to choose how I might actually have that formatted. But I also could choose to bring things over with just a little bit of structure, right? So I'm going to say text with structure, but not with all of the formatting like bolds and italics and things like that. I want to make those choices myself. I might not want it to be bold, etc. And I could bring this over with some of the structure, but you'll notice that it didn't add that bolding that was a part of that document originally. So we can copy and paste in content right from Word into our Dreamweaver document, but keep in mind that you might want to choose the paste special option so you can make sure that the content is coming over as you'd want it and with the code that you actually want. That might give it some structure and formatting. I like to typically remove most of that formatting since I want to make those choices myself. A couple last notes here. You'll notice that I can select my content quickly by dragging my cursor around it, right? So just dragging up and down, we could do that. You're also able to do some simple things like, select a paragraph and then just grab that to move it. So if I wanted to restructure this to move one of these paragraphs up and down, I could do that. That's similar to your code as well, where we'd be able to cut it and then repaste it. But within the working environment here, I can actually drag and drop stuff where I might want it to be, which can be kind of handy as well. If I wanted to select all, the Command A or Control A on the PC, Command A on Mac would allow us to do that, and that would be a kind of select all. You can see some of the quick keys to those things right here. If I want to get rid of stuff, I can hit delete or backspace in order to get rid of it. In terms of deleting content, I can do that. And in this case, I'm going to bring in my content using paste special, but without any structural formatting, because I want to choose all of that structure and also show you how to add some structure to your document, which I'll do in the very next video. And in this case, because I had selected my code in order to cut it, it came, when I pasted it back in, it came in with some of the tags as part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the Word doc, copy that code, and make sure that when I paste it into the environment, I use paste special without any actual formatting. And there we go. That's what I'll begin with in the next video.